I think that we're entering a new epidemic, and we're entering a new epidemic that we've never seen before. Because of the use of GLP-1s, we're able to accelerate muscle loss weeks that would normally take 20 years. This idea of sarcopenia, which is a decrease in muscle mass and strength, is accelerating above and beyond in a domain that we've never seen. And I believe that the next epidemic is actually, we're going to trade obesity for sarcopenia and osteoporosis in amounts that we have never seen before, that no physician is going to be equipped to deal with.
Welcome to Longevity by Design, a podcast designed to give individuals access to the leading scientific information in the field of longevity. The ability to add years to your life and life to your years needs no opinion. Join us as we ask science to take the wheel. In each episode, Dr. Gil Blander joins a co-host and an industry expert in the field of longevity, shining a light and getting the answers to the key question: how can we live a longer, healthier life?
Hello, I'm Dr. Gil Blander. Welcome to Longevity by Design, how to live longer, healthier life. We are produced by InsideTracker, your science-based guide to optimize your body from the inside out. Our guest today is Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, a board-certified family physician and New York Times bestseller author, is a leading voice in health and longevity. Her book, Forever Strong, also earned Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller status. She pioneered muscle-centric medicine, emphasizing skeletal muscle as a key to longevity and disease prevention. With a background in geriatric and nutrition science from Washington University and the University of Illinois, Dr. Lyon is a sought-after expert on protein's role in health, performance, and aging. Through her research, clinical work, and public outreach, she empowers individuals to build strength and longevity. Welcome, Dr. Lyon.
Thank you so much for having me. And I was telling you this before, oftentimes I don't do a ton of interviews, but Gil, I love your podcast and I absolutely love the guests that you bring on. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. One quick question. So the University of Illinois, that was in Urbana-Champaign?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, I love that university. Actually, now a scientific advisor for nutrition. So they're amazing.
Sure, that's amazing. So I did my undergraduate work there with Dr. Donald Lehman.
Okay, great. That's amazing. It's a small world, I would say.
Yes.
But let's go into our program. And I usually like to start the interview by a question about your background, and specifically what made you to become a physician and a scientist.
Well, I have to say, I am very lucky, and I started on this journey when I was extremely young. I graduated high school early, and I went directly into nutritional sciences. So my godmother happened to be a PhD in nutrition. I moved in with her because I graduated high school early. So I had a period of time, about 6 months before I started college, and it changed everything for me. I knew nutrition was something I was extraordinarily interested in, and the science was really important to me. I ended up at the University of Illinois, which you are an advisor for, in Dr. Donald Lehman's lab. And the rest is history. He is a innovator in protein metabolism and really one of the godfathers. There is very few individuals trained to the capacity that he has been trained to, and he's mentored me for 20 years. What most people don't know is, although I was in a nutrition trajectory at the University of Illinois, there was a tornado warning, and we all had to go to these fallout shelters. And I don't know if you've ever been to a fallout shelter in the basement at University of Illinois. You've not been lucky enough to experience that, but it isn't pleasant. We were there for about 2.5 hours. And during that time, I felt as if I was useless, that the skills that I had and the skills that I was learning was wonderful and helpful from a day-to-day perspective. But in case of an emergency or an urgent experience, I wasn't able to provide any value. And at that moment, I decided to go into medicine because I just wanted to be able to be useful in various domains for my fellow human. Did psychiatry for 2 years. That found out that wasn't for me. And then I did family practice, a residency for 3 years. And following family practice residency, I had a very frank conversation with Dr. Donald Lehman again, who's mentored me for over decades. And he said, if you really want to create the impact that I know that you do, you are going to have to go do a fellowship, and you are going to have to do a fellowship in nutritional sciences. And that is how I ended up at Washington University. I did a dual fellowship in geriatrics and nutritional sciences for 2 years.
Excellent. And I love the fact that you, from early age, you wanted to have an impact on the world. And that's, I think, the difference maybe from less a person that is striving to big and want to make a change than a other person that I just want to rest in the afternoon and, and then drink a beer. And I think that everyone should learn from that. When you want to make a change in the world, usually you will do that. If you strive to the moon, you will get to the moon. If you won't strive to the moon, you won't strive to the moon. So I really like it, and
Well,
it's very exciting. And you mentioned that you went and studied geriatric, but what sparked your interest specifically in longevity and health span?
frankly, I wasn't interested in geriatrics, and my training during geriatrics I found extremely depressing, but it impacted me the most in all of my medical training. Hands down, geriatric training was the most valuable. And for the listener who may be not familiar with geriatrics, it's anyone over the age of 60. And over a span of 2 years as a fellow, you have to run a memory and aging clinic. You are rounding at nursing homes. You are on the stroke ward. You are doing various things that you see the end result of poor aging typically throughout life. Geriatrics and the problems and challenges that come with geriatrics, again, over the age of 65, are typically not acute challenges. They are, again, a series of choices, known or unknown, that an individual makes with, of course, genetics. But the end result, if you are in the hospital due to geriatrics, is often not great. If you are in a nursing home and unable to care for yourself, it's devastating. And being young at the time, and I was very interested in athletics and very interested in muscle health, it is a moment that you're faced with your own mortality, and that you are faced, in the US, we are all about youth, and we are all about the moment and striving for the moment. We very rarely think about the future. And that might seem a bit depressing, but there is this life, and then there's this transition to death, which I can't even believe that I'm saying this, but it struck me. And it struck me that I was so ill prepared for seeing the end of life. And at that moment, and by the way, I did not want to do geriatrics. Again, I found it incredibly depressing. But in order for me to study nutritional sciences, I had to be able to get funding. And the way for me to get funding was to go through geriatrics. All that being said, I ended up loving it for the lessons that it taught me and the skills that it provided me. And that shaped everything for me in this concept of muscle-centric medicine. It really was so necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, the point that you said about everyone in the US think about today and not tomorrow, that's so true. And we are not thinking about investing enough money in our 401k. We are not doing enough prevention, but we are just treating the disease when we have it. And that's where we are today. And I think that what you are doing and other that trying to prepare us to later stage, and how can we be more prepared and hopefully increase our health span. I'm sure that we'll discuss it later.
Muscle
That's
span, friend. It's muscle span, Gil. There's
okay.
life,
Muscles.
there's health span, and there's muscle span,
Okay,
which is
I
the
agree with you. Yeah,
infrastructure that supports our overall strength and foundation.
absolutely. And we'll discuss it later. Before we go to that, which is very exciting for me, one more question. You published a paper for Forever Strong, and it became a bestseller. What drove you to write that book?
Quite simply, the public need. Actually, two reasons. The public need for this information, and to honor my longtime mentor. Uh, you know, the way that I believe we go through life, again, maybe this is philosophical, but I believe of being of service. We are a military family. We are I was telling you that my husband was a former Navy SEAL who is now training to be a surgeon. It's a very service-oriented family, and that is core to our beliefs and where we believe that our energy is most important of putting effort in, and also honoring my mentor of decades and providing a framework for our fellow human.
Yeah. And I know maybe I shouldn't say it, but I know that you're writing a few more books,
To
s- two more.
probably
Uh,
get on the second one because it's due in less than a month.
okay, wow. And I assume that it's a lot of work, and I'm not sure that the audience appreciate how hard is it to write a book. Can you elaborate a bit about that? How much time are you dedicating to such a book?
Um, uh, the time is extensive. So I have two more books coming out. The next book is a manual. For example, someone could pick up the book and say, "Oh, recovery. Oh, fat loss. Here's a protocol for each." It is very minimal sciences. It's minimal science explained, but it's all evidence based. And we just wanted to provide a manual that was above and beyond Forever Strong, and that comes out in January of 2026, and then the following year, a Forever Strong for women, perimenopause and menopause, which I think
Wow.
is going to be really critical. And to your initial question is how long does that take? It takes easily over a year per book, and it's not segmented. So there's not really a differentiation between life and work. You don't do work in spite of life or live life in spite of work. And it's just always collecting information from the people and the patients that I see. I still have a very active medical practice, which is largely telehealth, but we're still very active in collecting data and seeing what people are struggling with, implementing new protocols, and seeing if we can move the needle for people. And that's
Wow.
all I would say work in the book. It's not
Yeah.
just the writing.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you love it because it's very hard to write a book if you don't love doing it. And again, it's a part of what is my legacy for the world that we discussed before. So I really appreciate what you are doing, and it's great to bring the science to the masses instead of keeping it in PubMed and
Yeah.
nobody is reading it.
And Gil, I have to say, when you and I were growing up mm, or within science, we are in a very different landscape. When I was doing my undergraduate work and when I was doing my graduate work, there is a very professional and respectful scientific dialogue. And there were the experts, and then there were the trainees, and there were questions and debates, but it was always, for the most part, very respectful, for the most part. Social media was not a thing. Now we are in a vastly different landscape in which expertise can become unclear. The general population might not know and understand who is actually trained in what they're talking about because of how easy it is for someone to call themselves an expert. And it's a fascinating and somewhat unfortunate landscape, but that's another reason why it was important for me to write this book. And, I actually still continue to publish scientific papers. This is, I am going to be publishing a series of papers on hormones with some of my colleagues at Baylor. And, we do veteran research on exposures and we publish a paper on bladder cancer. So there is a collaborative effort, I think, within individuals that is somewhat different than perhaps some of the influencers that you see out there. And ideally, what would happen is that the influencers are informed by the experts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, I
then,
agree with you.
okay,
Social media made it very easy for everyone to say whatever you want, and there is no
checks
no
and
vetting system that
that's right.
comes say, "Hey, this guy can say that or he can't." And yeah. But that's the world that we are living for, the good and the bad. So let's talk about your expertise.
Yeah.
And my first question is, what is the biggest organ in the human body?
Well, that is quite simply skeletal muscle, which, everyone has always said that it's skin.
Yeah.
And the study of skeletal muscle in the way as an organ system is relatively new. And when I say relatively new, we're talking 20 some years. the science of nutrition is also relatively new. It's still in its infancy from my perspective. For example, Donald Layman is the first generation. There was Ansel Keys and Hegstead, this first generation of people that were kind of trying to figure out amino acids and vitamin C. And then the first generation of scientists, they're in their 70s, maybe a little bit older, but that's really like that first generation. And so we're still very new in our understanding of these amino acids and skeletal muscle in its interorgan crosstalk. We've made incredible advances, but skeletal muscle is above and beyond contractile tissue that we think about for looking good or maintaining metabolism. It truly is an organ system and does what we see other organ systems do.
Yeah. And why is the muscle so important? And what are the muscle function in the human body?
Muscle is, in my opinion, the most important organ system. And there's a series of reasons as to why that is. So number one, there's the obvious. There's the ability to take care of activities of daily living. There's the ability to generate force and power and strength, all critical. That is based on exercise and movement. The other really important aspect, and again, there's many, is that skeletal muscle provides an amino acid reservoir. It's where we store the building blocks. And when we go through crises like cancer or any kind of highly catabolic state or starvation or major illnesses, this is where we count on skeletal muscle to, quite frankly, really support us. And it's where we pull from. The other part is it releases myokines through exercise. When we exercise and contract that tissue, this is where we see it as an endocrine organ. It releases interleukins or what we often call, what we think of as cytokines, as myokines. For example, the most famous is probably interleukin 6, which is fascinating because not only do these myokines create and inform the adipose tissue in the bone, give them information, but it actually affects the way the liver and other organ systems process carbohydrates, fats. So it's not just exercise that makes an impact from the energy expenditure perspective, but also what the skeletal muscle produces.
Okay. And any other metabolic benefit of healthy muscle?
Oh, of course. It's the site of fatty acid oxidation. There's millions and tens of millions. I think the last I heard, maybe it was 90 million people on statins. I don't know if that number is correct. A couple of years ago, it was 40 million. I'm assuming that it's much higher now. And people use statins to treat fatty acids or cholesterol often, but skeletal muscle is a site of fatty acid oxidation, primarily at rest. It is also the site of glucose disposal. We are in this landscape of increasing chronic disease, and oftentimes those diseases are driven by an aberrant metabolism, a dysfunctional metabolism. That dysfunctional metabolism is typically seen in roots of metabolic syndrome. For example, elevated levels of triglycerides, elevated levels of glucose, hypertension. You might see increased levels of insulin, subsequently type 2 diabetes. And we know that this creates habit and puts you at risk for things like Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease. These are all symptoms in part of skeletal muscle, because skeletal muscle is the primary disposal unit in which orchestrates the metabolism.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. The muscle is definitely an organ that need more attention. And what is the relationship between muscle and longevity / aging?
Probably one of my favorite questions. And there is always seems to be continuing data that the stronger that you are in midlife, there is a 2.5 times greater chance that you live to 100. Again, this is one study, but there are a series of papers that are coming out. The stronger you are in midlife, the greater your chances of living longer. The stronger you are, the greater chance that you will live healthier, the less likely you are to die of all-cause mortality. And it all makes sense, right? The stronger you are, ideally, the better your muscle health is, the better your muscle health is, better you are able to manage the external world, both physically and also from a dietary perspective.
Yeah. My next question is, what is the best way to build and maintain muscle as we get older?
Well, this is an interesting question. And I think that it makes sense to start from um, youth. And the stronger you are in youth, the better and more capacity you are later on in life. So, what do I mean by that? And this brings up something that is often spoken about. You know, I'm a parent of two very little children. I have a 3 and 5-year-old. And we hear routinely that children shouldn't work out and that lifting weights is bad for their bones and a series of things. Um, but no one seems to complain if a child is on an iPad, right? No one cares about that, or if they are sitting at school for 8 hours. And I would say this brings up this concept of muscle span. And muscle span is the length of time that you live with healthy skeletal muscle and that you maintain strength over your life. There are periods of transition that it becomes even more critical to focus on activity and building muscle and less about diet. When you're young, you are very flexible from a dietary perspective. I know that we'll discuss the input of dietary protein and high quality proteins and various amino acids. When you're young, there is a different metabolic threshold, a different anabolic threshold. We oftentimes don't study children, but it's believed that children are so anabolic that they might get a muscle benefit from 5 to 10 grams of dietary protein, which an adult wouldn't. When they're young, they're very focused on physical activity. Dietary influence is not nearly as significant. And when you go through midlife and hormones begin to change, there's this transition from really understanding you to begin to transition your diet meaning your intake of protein and how you do it. The total protein matters, but then how you influence each meal begins to also matter. And the first answer to that question is build muscle when you are young and you're anabolically driven and you have the capacity and the time to do it. And that
Yeah.
means strength training. And again, my kids strength train with me, but we don't have them on a very rigorous schedule. They do it when they want to, pick up kettlebells, they walk around with heavy weights. It's fun for them. And then of course, midlife, or let's say even before midlife in college, this is when I believe that you start to get very serious. Once you're out of high school, listen, if you're going to train in high school, that's wonderful. But once you're out of high school and you are entering college, then this is where I would say a minimum of 3 days a week. Again, you're still driven more by hormones at this age, but 3 days a week should be focused on resistance training. And as we age, I would say 4 to 5 days a week would be optimal. I would be happy. Anyone over 30, 40, 50, 60 and beyond, 4 days a week of strength training becomes non-negotiable. I will also say that as individuals enter into their later years, 70s, there is evidence, 70s, 80s and beyond, there is evidence that those individuals can still become stronger and put on muscle.
Yeah.
I would say that let's not wait, but as we age, the frequency and intensity of training, I believe, should begin to increase, which is, I think, counterintuitive.
Yeah. And just an anecdote, my mom just turned 90 and she cannot live without twice a week Pilates exercise. And I'm encouraging her to do that. And I'm saying, maybe do 3 times a week. Why not? You have time. And I think that that's a big difference. When I'm looking at my father is 93, my mother is 90, and both of them are pretty in a good shape. And I think that's because of what we discussed later, nutrition, but also exercise and brain health and all of that. So that's exactly the difference between a good lifestyle and a bad lifestyle. And I spoke with a smart person yesterday, smart scientist. He told me that you've seen a paper that showed that the difference can be 24 years. So if you combine the exercise and the sleep and the nutrition and the social and all of that, altogether it can be a difference of 24 years if you do all of that and you don't do that. That's amazing. That's crazy.
And I'm going to say something else because I think that we're entering a new epidemic, and we're entering a new epidemic that we've never seen before. Because of the use of GLP-1s, we're able to accelerate muscle loss
Yeah.
in weeks that would normally take 20 years.
Yeah.
And so this idea of sarcopenia, which is a decrease in muscle mass and strength, is accelerating above and beyond in a domain that we've never seen. And I believe that the next epidemic is actually, we're going to trade obesity for sarcopenia and osteoporosis in amounts that we have never seen before, that no physician is going to be equipped to deal with, because we're so focused on treating obesity, and these medications are extraordinary, and we've never seen anything as effective. And what I'm talking about is Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, tirzepatide, and they're amazing, and we need them. However, the way in which they are being utilized is going to be devastating if we do get some of the fundamentals taken care of.
Yeah, and I think that it's going back to the introduction that you introduced yourself, and you said, today Americans thinking about today, not tomorrow. And that's exactly a good example. Yeah, we have a Ozempic, take it, but go to the gym. Don't take it and lie on the sofa and watch a Netflix. Do something about that, because we know that it's not like new. Everyone know from the beginning of the work of Lilly and Novo Nordisk. They know one of the side effects is muscle loss. So go to the gym and lift some weight.
But I will also say that it doesn't have to be, and that we know that the rate at which someone loses weight determines how much lean mass is lost. Even if someone loses fat, let's say someone is going very slow, losing, when I say very slow, the slower that you can lose weight, the better. Obviously, the more heavy you are, the faster and easier it is to lose weight. But if, when we utilize these agents, if people are losing 2 pounds or more a week, then up to 50%, 50% can come from lean mass. And we recognize that lean mass is not just muscle. Muscle is part of lean mass, but lean mass is organ and bone and other tissues. The use of these GLP-1s accelerates that lean mass loss so quickly, and it is so difficult to put on skeletal muscle with the use of these agents. And I will also say that these agents don't do anything. I was looking at the data of bariatric surgery, and they're just very similar. The thing is those that don't qualify for bariatric surgery, that wouldn't have access to bariatric surgery, have access to these medications. So we are seeing bariatric surgery weight loss numbers in people that don't qualify for bariatric surgery. And the loss, depending on what it is, could be 50% from lean mass and 50% from, and then the ability, because the habits are not put in, there's nothing magical about the GLP-1s that are causing, there's no mechanism of action that I can find that is specific to skeletal muscle mass. It just seems to be that rapid weight loss from calorie restriction and not potentially doing the other things that are necessary to maintain that lean tissue. But we are in for a new epidemic. I'm convinced.
Yeah, no, you're right. I assume that's what's happening.
As a Longevity by Design podcast listener, you understand the value of improving your health for today and for all the years ahead. And if you want to live your healthiest, longest life possible, you need to understand what's going on inside. At InsideTracker, we take a personalized approach to health span optimization that eliminates guesswork from your wellness plan. InsideTracker analyzes blood biomarker and DNA data, along with physiomarker data from fitness trackers like Oura Ring, to deliver personalized food, supplement, lifestyle, and exercise recommendations that allow you to take control and improve your health span. And for a limited time, Longevity by Design listeners can get 20% off at the InsideTracker store. So if you're ready to receive a personal health analysis and data-driven wellness plan to optimize your body for the long haul, then it's time to start inside. Visit InsideTracker.com/podcast to get started today. That's InsideTracker.com/podcast to get started today.
One more question related to build muscle in older age. So I think that in older age, women and men are a bit different, and women. Maybe let's start with women. So let's say a listener here, she is still premenopausal, but she is, I don't know, in her late 40s versus someone that is a perimenopausal versus someone that is a postmenopausal, just early, and let's say someone in the 60s. What any different technique that they should do, or just go to the gym and lift weight the same way?
So I'm going to speak from the evidence, and then I'm going to speak from my opinion. The
Okay.
evidence, there's a lot of discussion around training specific for women. I am still unclear as if that evidence holds up, that if it is about women or is it just interpersonal variation, right? Whether it is a man or a woman, it seems that the same things that allow a man to grow muscle is the same input that would be for a woman to grow muscle. I just haven't seen the evidence yet that makes me think, okay, it's definitely sex specific. I'm not so convinced. And maybe we'll get there because, in my opinion, what I would imagine is that it would be different, but I don't see that the evidence is supporting. And so the training for a perimenopausal versus a postmenopausal versus a 60-year-old woman, what do I see the differences are? In perimenopause, women typically still have hormones, right? They still might have more energy and more testosterone and more estrogen and progesterone. But as women transition into menopause, where estrogen decreases, testosterone over a period of time decreases, there's this distribution of body fat into central adiposity, potentially visceral adiposity, which is fat around the organs. They still require mechanical tension to build muscle. And it's not that it would be totally different. It might be easier to gain muscle when you're younger, but I would say that the training foundation is still the same, and that at the underbelly is providing enough mechanical tension to stimulate that tissue appropriately and then allow for the necessary inflammatory processes, adapt and repair, and continue to do that. There are certain things that I do also think that are important. So number one, I don't see right now sex specific differences yet, but I'm excited that potentially there will be more of. Number two, that whether it is heavyweight versus volume versus lighter weight, at McMaster University, they have looked at older individuals, they've looked at heavier weight, and they've looked at lighter weight, and both seem to be universally effective as long as the stimulus is there. And you asked me specifically, what should they do? It's very difficult to give a specific recommendation because it all depends on where an individual is within their strength training journey. For me, I've been training for over 20 years. It's going to require more of a stimulus for me to build muscle and make adaptations than, say, a friend of mine who has not trained at all. The newer you are to training, the faster you'll be able to see results. But what becomes critical is having a structured program. You mentioned 401k. That is a structured investment strategy. We know how much is going in a year. We potentially know how much we're going to get. And the system is structured to provide a value. The same has to be done for exercise. There is a prescriptive amount based on that individual, based on their injuries, based on their capacity, because strength training is a skill. There are things that I think are critical to do. There's definitely strength training. There's no substitute for resistance exercise. You can start with bands, you can start with body weight, then move to bands, then you can move to machines, but you do need to progressively overload that weight. And again, it could be based on the volume. There's many different ways to continue the stimulus, but I do believe that moving to more challenging weights is important. And of course, there's this strength training hypertrophy continuum. The other aspect is that I think is underappreciated is this intense training. So we talk a lot about zone 2 training. Zone 2 training takes a lot of time. It's where you're doing cardio and you can talk. And it's kind of having a heyday right now. I personally don't think it's necessary. You could get the same influence and impact in the body by doing zone 5 training. And Martin Gabala, also at McMaster University, talks a lot about high intensity interval training, and it allows you to minimize time while being even more efficient and effective.
Yeah.
All that being said, there are multiple things that individuals can do, but it should be structured and with the goal of we are not training to become better at exercise. We are training to become stronger at life and diligent at learning the skill of strength training.
Yeah. No, I agree. And again, going back to the 401k analogy that we are using, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, start as early as possible. The same as 401k. If you put 10k at the age of 20, maybe you don't need to put any more money and you'll have enough money to retire because you have so many years to have the compound interest. It's the same here. If you have someone like you, Gabriel, that have a good a baseline of muscle, it's much easier to maintain than to build it from nothing. And every year that passes, it's even harder. So if you ask me when to start today, or maybe
Best day
yesterday.
to start was today. The best day to start was yesterday, but the second
Yeah,
best time to start.
yeah,
And I'm going to give you some statistics on where we are. What we really need to do is we need to get to our youth. Any adult listening to this conversation, guys, you need to be training. And I don't know if you know this, Gil, but I've been using InsideTracker for years because InsideTracker allows me to tell the health of skeletal muscle for my patients. I don't know if you know that, but that's pretty
I didn't
amazing.
know that. No, thank you so much.
I've been using the InsideTracker um, program. I don't even know if you want to call it program, but services for years with my patients because they can go and they can get a blood draw. That being said, it allows me insight into the health of skeletal muscle. To identify healthy skeletal muscle, number one, there is a function metric. So it is about strength and you can pick how many push-ups can you do? How long can you dead hang? Let's say you're going to do a farmer carry. Do I think a squat and a deadlift and a bench press is necessary? No, I think that it's understanding your individual domain. It would be like me saying, Gil, you and I should have the same financial plan. There's a million different ways to accumulate financial security, just as there's a million different ways that an individual can accumulate physical security. It is about understanding where you are and testing yourself, knowing, let's say you run, how fast can you run a mile? How many push-ups can you do? If you want to squat, great, squat. If you want a goblet squat, great. Pick certain movements and understand where you are so you can track improvement. And how we identify healthy skeletal muscle is the same way that we look at metabolic syndrome. But people think metabolic syndrome is really looking at fat. But in my mind, it's looking at healthy skeletal muscle. In the beginning of our conversation, I had said that triglycerides are an indication of metabolic syndrome. Triglycerides 100 or less, now you're talking about healthy skeletal muscle because skeletal muscle is the primary site of fatty acid oxidation. Also, fasting blood glucose. When your blood glucose is within range, now you're telling me that you have healthy skeletal muscle. Same with fasting insulin. These are ways in which if we shift the perspective from a fat-focused perspective to a muscle-centric perspective, we begin to reconsider how we examine our own personal evidence. What scares me is where we are. And I'm going to give you some statistics that I have on physical activity, okay? According to the WHO, 81% of adolescents are physically inactive. That's ages 11 to 17. 70% of youth are ineligible for military services because they are physically incapable. I'm going to give you some more because this is our future, right? So we are now needing to course correct at younger and younger ages. Physical activity declines by 7 years old. Only 27% of children are meeting physical activity guidelines, roughly 27 to maybe 30%. That means almost 70% are not. And again, what are we doing to their lives? As children, they're watching us. And so we have to really intervene early and often. And it doesn't just come about from listening to the science. It comes about from personal responsibility and implementing the science as an example for us to do so that our youth does that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that it's a huge problem. And I'm not sure what is the solution because it's tough, but I think that one way, and you describe it well, is less important what you do, but it's more important for you to do something. So if you are a woman that really likes Zumba, go and do Zumba every day. It's better than to sit on the couch. It's not as good as lifting weight, but it's better than sitting on the couch. And if you like, I don't know, a lot of people in my age like pickleball, go and play pickleball.
Absolutely.
It's better than not doing it. And at the end of the day, it's a new activity that you need to do for life. So find something that you like. It's like, I don't want anyone to work in a job that he doesn't like. The same in the free time. If you have a free time, find a job find something that you like to do and do it. And I see myself as someone that is addicted to exercise, and I like it, and I'm proud of it. It's much better to be addicted to the gym, and I assume that Gabrielle, you are as well, than to be addicted to alcohol or to some drugs and I don't go to Vegas all the time and gamble. So
And Gil, listen, I don't like training half the time. I try to talk myself out of it every morning. If I've had a late night, again, I have 2 little kids, I still can't get them to sleep in their own bed. I'm already complaining that I know that I have to get up early and I'm going to the gym. I'm complaining the night
yeah,
before, but
yeah,
my complaints and my immediate feeling doesn't impair my ability to take action.
yeah,
And that is what we want for all people, because one has to understand aging is coming. It's not an if, it is a when. It is coming for
yeah,
all of us. And
yeah,
if we want to be successful at our life, I'm not talking about financial, I'm not talking about scientifically, I am talking about successful in the daily operations of our life. We have to plan for the best of to the best of our ability, the unknown, not the
yeah.
known insults that are coming, but the unknown ones. And it's a
No,
non.
absolutely. And I think that I really like the point that you raised, that even someone like you, that everyone's saying, oh, she is addicted to exercise and all of that. It's also hard for you, but you understand and also make it a habit already. And a day that I'm not exercising, and I assume that it's the same for you, I feel bad. I feel really bad. I feel like I miss something in my day. And I will, I don't know, I will move meeting, an important meeting, in order to go to the gym, or I will wake up, which is crazy. I will wake up maybe earlier, which is not good. Sleep is very important, but sometimes I will do that in order to exercise. To come say, okay, I've done it. I can now continue in my day. And
That's wonderful
person
because,
need to get to that point.
yes,
Yeah.
it
Uh,
is. The way to do it, I think, is to understand. Listen, how many people go out of the house without brushing their teeth or showering? I
hopefully
mean,
nobody.
that is listening probably doesn't, but for the rest of the population, we are able to understand that in order to be in society, I mean, maybe that we have to kind of brush our teeth and wear
Yeah.
deodorant, like maybe, but there are definitely have to shower over a period of time. And so, and also, how about this? We all eat. People eat. This is no different. It's uncomfortable and it's annoying that you have to train. But if we can reconfigure our minds around that we are actually investing in our future and building our infrastructure, our physical infrastructure, and that there are things, listen, it going to the gym is sometimes really challenging. And if you're doing it right, it is really challenging and it should be. And we have to embrace some of this discomfort. And you also have to realize that you have to be diligent. You shouldn't just go to the gym and listen, if you're going to go to the gym, I'm happy with it. I don't care if you don't have a great program, but ideally you should. Just like you should be tracking your blood work.
Yeah.
I can't give you a great recommendation on what you need to do if I don't actually see what your blood work is.
Yeah.
And it's prescriptive,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. One more question related to aging and maybe exercise. It's there is an old potato that called HRT, hormone replacement therapy. In the past, I remember that my mom got it, and then some clinician blame it for increase rise in breast cancer. Now some people are saying that it's good because it's allow you to pass the menopause transition better. What is your opinion about that?
The Women's Health Initiative was one of the biggest health failures of our time. And it has affected a generation of women that were not provided hormone replacement therapy. From the data that I see in my own clinical practice, I believe very strongly in hormone replacement therapy and menopause hormone replacement therapy, which is estrogens, estradiol, progestins, and testosterone. I also believe that very strongly for men as well. And the safety is there. The safety is there. Again, you know, something that's very interesting about humans is if we hear something enough, it becomes true. And we oftentimes don't challenge the foundation understanding. I'm going to give you an example. And I interviewed on my podcast Dr. Abe Morgentaler. And Dr. Abe Morgentaler is the person who brought testosterone replacement therapy to the modern era. Let that sink in for a second. But before he did, he was at Harvard. He did his undergraduate at Harvard, studied reptile brains and testosterone. After that, went to Harvard Medical School and then postdoc. Then he did his graduate training at Harvard and then just a Harvard legacy and then urology. And as a urologist, his patients would come in and they would be complaining of, low testosterone. And at the time, nobody gave testosterone therapy because the belief based on this godfather who ended up winning the Nobel Prize wrote a paper that testosterone caused prostate cancer. For decades, they castrated men because they believed that that was the treatment, that if the removal of testosterone producing organs were gone, that those individuals would do better. And then that giving testosterone caused prostate cancer. This doctor, Dr. Abe Morgentaler, initiated testosterone replacement therapy in these men because he knew it didn't make sense. And his colleagues said, you are going to kill people. You are reckless. He was thrown in the fire and just crucified year after year by doctors. And so what he did, and he was terrified that he was going to hurt these patients, but they were suffering from quality of life. What did he do? He eventually went to the basement of Harvard and he pulled out the paper because he assumed that everyone had examined this paper because it had become the standard. Guess what that paper said and how many patients that paper was based
on? I don't know, small amount, 20?
One.
And
a meaningful patient who did testosterone replacement therapy for 18 days.
Yeah.
And the test that they used to study was no longer used because they determined that it was ineffective at determining levels of things that they were looking at. And so the test used to determine that somehow that testosterone caused prostate cancer, they didn't even use anymore.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there was no quality evidence, and they had castrated men for decades.
Yeah. And we see, you mentioned the InsideTracker before, we see at the InsideTracker database, now we have a lot of people in the database, and you see that I would say maybe 20% of the population, of the male population, have too low testosterone. And that's bad because you lose, it's hard for you to build muscle, it's hard for you to behave and make decisions. It's hard for your sex life. It's very bad. And absolutely, if you have low testosterone, either try to increase it naturally, sleep better, eat better, and so on. But if not, why not to take it? Yeah, makes sense.
And fertility is down in men. Sperm count is down. I see one study that says on average 50%. As you become more obese, testosterone levels decline. As your sleep is poor, it affects testosterone. You make testosterone in your sleep, both men and women. And these are really big challenges when we're talking about universal health. And I mentioned that whole story because you asked me about hormone replacement therapy. The Women's Health Initiative that was stopped, widely publicized, a misrepresentation of the data as hormones as being harmful, when in fact, most of the time they're And
even if it is, I'm always believe in cost versus value.
Yeah.
So maybe again, I'm not an expert. Maybe there is a slightly increase. It's definitely, from what I'm hearing and seeing, it's not a huge increase in let's say breast cancer. But in another hand, those women are suffering from flushes and a lot of other. So I think that it's everyone need to make the cost versus value comparison and together with the clinician, decide what to do.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, sometimes you want to live well, you want to enjoy life. So
Yeah.
sometimes you need to take some risk.
And I have this one patient, um, and he's no longer a patient, and he was just terrified of hormone replacement. I just watched him suffer with joint pain,
Yeah,
and his wife just suffer terribly because they were so physically active and joint pain, low muscle mass, low energy. And they were just terrified of hormone replacement therapy because of everything that was in the media,
yeah,
and it becomes very difficult. And that's why really sitting down and examining, Gil, just what you said, um, the cost, benefit, and the risks become critical. Hormone replacement therapy is not the enemy. And it's fascinating because more so now than ever, I believe that we are going to need it. And it also, in addition to that, there are other anabolic agents that have been used in HIV, cancer wasting, burn, osteoporosis that also have an incredibly negative stigma that I don't believe should. And we're it's a very touchy subject, unfortunately, and I'm hoping in the next 5 years we are liberated from that because individuals that are doing andrology, that are trained andrologists, which is the study of male sex hormones, they use various agents above and beyond testosterone. They're agents that have been used for decades and have a great safety profile, but it's still such a taboo topic. But the science doesn't support that it should be.
yeah.
And so our minds are limiting our ability to really have access to the things that would maintain a muscle span and an overall health span.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And I'm happy that we discuss it. And I want now to maybe switch gear and discuss a bit about protein. So why protein are important for muscle, and how much do we need to eat or consume protein every day? I know that it's not simple, but let's start with the basic
Yeah.
question.
Well, the first thing that we have to recognize is that we discuss dietary protein as if it's one thing, but it is, 23 different amino acids, all with unique biochemical and individual properties. So it is not necessarily interchangeable, just like when we discuss vitamin C or B6 or vitamin D. There are, they all do various things. And protein, although if you look at the back of a label, says it's one thing, again, it is, you know, um, 20 different amino acids, right? So we're
Yeah.
looking at, again, various amino acids.
And so that's going into a plant versus animal, because, and maybe you will explain, but
Well,
there are
maybe not. Maybe not. So the first thing that we have to understand um, is that again, it's these various individual amino acids that have to be thought of as essential nutrients that are not, and we do not have really the capacity to do that yet. And sorry, I said 23. There are roughly 20 amino acids for humans. It could be 20. Um, some are recycled, obviously many are recycled, but the reality is that the perspective right now is that we discuss protein as if it's one thing, and that framework deeply sets us up for failure, and it allows for mistakes to happen because it's very complex. I mean, I don't have a great way to say, Gil, are you eating enough methionine? Do you have enough lysine? How is your tryptophan and threonine? You would say, Gabrielle, those are all essential amino acids, but I have no idea and I don't even know the amount that I should have. So
Yeah,
it's much easier for us to say, okay, well, you should have the current RDA is 0.37 grams per pound or zero 0.8 grams per kg. And that's the minimum to prevent a deficiency. But that's also based on high quality proteins, but it's not breaking down histidine, isoleucine, leucine, which is really, if we think about it one step further, threonine is necessary for mucin production. So let's say someone is having gut issues or maybe Crohn's disease or some kind of inflammatory bowel disease. They might need more dietary threonine. Or let's say someone is, I don't know, having issues with tryptophan or serotonin production. Maybe they need more tryptophan. or they're having challenges with building muscle. They likely need more leucine or all of the branched chain amino acids, and then moving to all the essential amino acids. And I say this deeply to confuse everybody. Not really. I say this because this is how complex the conversation of dietary protein is. And in order for it to be effective for the general population and even for physicians and providers to give recommendations, we have to simplify it for the general population. And the way in which we've done that is we've created guidelines. We've created the recommended dietary allowance. And then we've also created, there's dietary guidelines. The RDA has not changed over the last 40 some years. It hasn't changed, which is bananas to think, because Gil, you and I know that they're always advancing research. And the fact that we haven't changed these recommendations for the general population is terrifying, quite frankly. And that 0.8 grams of protein per kg is the minimum to prevent a deficiency based on nitrogen balance studies of younger male population.
Yeah. And so
Right.
let's take an example. Let's assume that I'm, I don't know, lifting weights 3 times a week and doing aerobic another 3 times a week and doing some yoga. What is the amount that I should do? I should take more or?
The minimum amount of protein that I would recommend anyone to have is 100 grams per day. And
Okay.
that is interesting because if you were to calculate that out based on the RDA, like let's say someone has, so the minimum amount of protein, male or female, someone should have would be 100 grams.
Okay.
The reason is because you're really also looking for metabolic benefit. It's
Yeah.
not just about, there's other metabolic benefits. There's, again, threonine, methionine, leucine, lysine, all of these amino acids. And metabolic benefit is also the amount that you take in at once, which, will stimulate muscle protein synthesis that helps with the health of skeletal muscle above and beyond. So if we were to just set the bar at the minimum of 100, I think that that's important. But I'm also going to calculate for you what the current recommendation, if I can get it for you, would be, because I just want to share that we're this off. So if we had, let's say we had someone on a low calorie diet, 1200 calories, and we were going to give them the RDA for protein. So if they're on 1200 calories times what? Oh, I can't do my head. Yeah, well, whatever that is. But you're probably looking at, I mean, we'd have to calculate it, but it's so low, right? The
Yeah.
average individual is, according to the dietary guidelines, 45% of individuals are below the recommended amount of dietary protein. And as we get older, so let's say you're in your 60s, I guarantee if we were to track your mom's calories and macronutrients, there's a 40% chance she would be deficient in dietary protein. Why this becomes so important is you cannot support healthy aging without dietary protein or healthy muscle mass. It's just not going to happen.
Okay. So let me try to summarize what you are saying. Almost half of us are not consuming enough protein. If you are exercise, you need to consume more. A follow-up question is about the distribution over the day. Is it okay for me, I don't know, to drink a big shake that have 100 gram of protein in the morning and that's it? I forgot about it, or it's better to distribute it over the meals?
It's a wonderful question. So Arnell, and there's kind of two answers there. So Arnell, there's a French group that actually did some of these studies in older women where they gave them one meal of a high protein, I think it was 60 or 70 grams, or they broke it out for 10 grams of protein each meal. At the end of the study, those that had the one big bolus meal did better in terms of body composition than those that broke it out every, 10 grams of protein per meal.
Yeah.
According to a protein hierarchy, the number one most important is the total protein that you're getting in a 24-hour period or in a day. Let's just say for a day. That's really the baseline of the foundation. And when we talk about quality, the lower the quality of the protein, the more that you need, right? So if you are eating a lower quality protein, meaning maybe you're eating more plant-based proteins, you can certainly get enough of your protein by doing that, but you'll just require more. And a good number is maybe you would require 30% more. It just depends on what you choose.
Yeah.
Um, the from the evidence that myself and my mentor really look at and see is there's evidence that number one, you have to get the total protein amount, but there is benefit from more than one meal of the 60 grams of protein. The American population typically does two lower protein meals that are sub threshold, this meal protein synthesis, this muscle protein synthesis. So it's a bolus amount of amino acids that then stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Muscle protein synthesis is not a perfect measure of muscle health, but it is by proxy the best that we have. And it's believed that when you stimulate muscle with this threshold of amino acids over time, it helps with the protection of skeletal muscle.
Okay.
2 meals a day, um, above, in an ideal world, I'd love to see 50 grams at 2 meals. I would be happy. There
Yeah.
is no downside to going above that. If anything, probably more of a benefit because our needs for amino acids are variable. That is how, at the very fundamental level, I would start. 2 meals a day, the first meal, I don't care when you have it, and the last meal when you're going to be going into an overnight fast.
Okay. That's interesting. And just to summarize, one point from what you said is that if you are a veggie eater, you need to consume at least 30% more protein because the quality of the protein, we know that they miss some amino acid and so on. It's lower, so you need more. Um,
And I want
Question about
to, sorry to interrupt. There's a few other things that I believe very much that animal-based products are deeply important for human health. And here's why. Because the conversation you and I are having, it's about amino acids and essential amino acids. But the reality is we eat whole foods. And I covered this in my podcast multiple times. We eat whole foods. And there is benefit from plant foods, fiber, phytonutrients that we don't get in animals. And there are properties in animal foods, especially as we age and especially when we are younger, that we do not get, if at all, or at least in the same nutrient densities as we do from animal foods, like
yeah,
heme iron, like B12, like vitamin D. These things we need. And, iron deficiency anemia is a huge problem. And there are also things like creatine and serine that we don't know if we are deficient or not enough, right? So it's not that we have deficiencies in these things, but there is a matrix of foods that have a full spectrum of B vitamins, all kinds of things that are critical. And it's important to not be myopic when we are thinking about protein because
yeah,
we eat these whole foods. And another thing is that, you know, um, beef consumption is down 40% since the 70s. We blame everything for animal-based products and our our issues haven't gone down, they've gone up.
yeah,
Um, I think that when we talk about muscle health, if we look at the quality of the food that we consume, 70% of our diet is coming from, I don't know, ultra processed foods, uh, added fats and grains. And we have to recognize that it's really about overconsumption of calories, low quality food, but it is not about demonizing red meats and animal foods. I just, again, Gil, why do I do this and why do I feel so passionately about it? Because when I was doing my geriatric training, I feel like I failed. And I feel like everybody around me failed because the people at the bedside that I was with, when I was at the bedside with these patients, they were on the train of eat low fat, high carb, and can't even tell you how they suffered. And we have an opportunity to course correct that. And I
yeah.
will do everything in my power to help.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you that everything that coming from a packet, everything that is industrial is basically try to avoid as much as you can. But if you buy the beef from a good quality of beef and you uh, cook it well and not burn it too much and so on and eat it, there are, as you said, a lot of macro and micronutrients that are high quality and definitely you should consume it. Again, do it in moderation. Don't eat only, at least in my opinion, don't eat only meat, and you should still eat vegetable and fruit and all of that. But definitely it is a very important, and I agree with you 100% about that. Question about protein post exercise. There is a lot of,
Doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. Okay.
It doesn't
Okay.
matter.
So it's good for everyone. And by the way, I interviewed the other expert, and they said the same. It's like there is not a huge evidence that you have the window of the 2 hours, and if it will be 2 hours and 1 minute, you are doomed. No, you're not doomed.
Here's where it would matter, is where it could have potential benefit, is if someone is doing exhaustive training and say they're new to exercise, or maybe if they're under eating in dietary protein.
Yeah.
And I really changed my position on this because, there was some early data by Stanzos, and it really looked like that post training that there was a benefit, but it's only because that's when it was looked at, as opposed to potentially just looked at in a 24-hour period. I think that, I want to believe that it matters. And again, I've changed my mind on this, but the evidence doesn't support that it matters. And really, it's as long as you're getting it within the day, where it's
No, and it's a good point, because I see in the gym that I'm going, a lot of people are coming with the powder in the in the shaker, and finish the exercise and running to fill water or whatever, and drink it immediately. I don't know if you'll agree with me, but if you can go home and make a real meal versus the protein powder, that might be better. Do you? Is it fair to
I
say?
actually don't agree with that. I
No?
think that, and here's why. I think that, well, I obviously think whole foods are amazing and should be incorporated at all times, but this is when I love a shake. And I actually use protein shakes quite frequently because it is important to have an entire meal. So it is important to have a condensed amount of time in which you're having the meal. For example, you don't want to drink a shake over a couple hours, because remember, we talked about this leucine threshold. You're supposed to get 2.5 grams of leucine at one time in a meal. If you are, when you are eating a full meal, there is fat, there's fiber, there's things that slow down absorption and digestion. And sometimes people don't finish their meal, and sometimes they're eating it over the whole day. And so I agree, for ease of getting your protein in, I actually have one protein shake a day, sometimes two, but one protein shake a day, just because I know how important it is. And a lot of people, listen, Gil, you're busy. You sitting having meetings with your, eating your chicken or steak or fish. Probably not. I mean, you might be, but
Yeah.
you can always have a protein shake. And there's so much to this conversation. There is so much to this conversation. For example, the dietary guidelines are so skewed. There's this whole conversation of saturated fat being bad, and they pick this number of 10% saturated fat, and that completely eliminates animal-based products to ever be considered healthy. For example, an egg, one whole egg, which we know has choline and fat-soluble vitamins, which is so important for brain development of kids and for pregnant mothers, because it has 18% saturated fat, which it really sometimes only has 6 grams of total fat. But because of the percentage, it will never be considered a healthy food.
Yeah.
We have to really reevaluate the guidelines, truly.
Yeah. And let's continue in the protein powder. So do you recommend better whey protein versus pea protein, or it doesn't matter?
I do. I actually recommend whey, because while whey is still processed, it has lactoalbumin, lactoferrin, lacto-alpha albumin, all of these bioactive ingredients for the most part, depending on where you're getting it. Pea protein, I am absolutely not a fan of, because it has other components in it. We don't know. It's been around for not that long, and you're concentrating a lot of compounds that maybe we don't know that it has. If I were to pick, I'd probably pick soy. And frankly, I think it's okay. I'm not a huge fan, but I'm definitely a greater fan of soy. And soy has a similar amino acid relationship to whey. than say hemp or something like that. And they can make pea protein have the same, but again, hasn't been around for that long. And we're condensing, think about it. Whey is made from, the curd of cheese. So we've just been consuming it for a lot longer. And I think that we know a lot more about it.
Yeah, and it's free to, we discussed it before. You have all the 20 amino acid in the whey protein, and in the pea, you might not have all of them, or they are heading, but it's a bit more complex. So I agree with you. Another question about protein is, I have the feeling, and again, I haven't researched it, that when I eat a protein high meal or taking the protein shake or protein bar, I feel much fuller. Is it something that you are aware of, that basically consuming meal with high protein make you feel fuller?
This is pretty well established. And actually, I've had Heather Lyon on. I've spoken to her at length, and she was she's definitely been a pioneer of satiety and dietary. Have you had Dr. Heather Lyon on the show?
No, not yet.
Oh,
Not yet.
she's amazing. And she did really some of the early studies that showed this 30-gram bolus was not only trigger satiety hormones in the gut, but also the brain. It triggered satiety in the brain. And she showed it in adolescence versus eating a higher protein meal versus breakfast skipping, which is phenomenal, because in order for anyone to maintain a healthy diet, they have to be able to not be hungry. People really don't like to be hungry.
Yeah.
They find it as a moment of emergency, which, you can certainly retrain yourself about that. But listen, if you're new to this and you don't like to be hungry, your first meal of the day, there is a satiation effect because of dietary protein that
Yeah.
should not be underestimated. And this brings up to this GLP-1. So GLP, people are saying high protein is equivalent to a GLP-1. It's not at all. A GLP-1 medication lasts for a week, and it's long lasting and it's intense. GLP-1 or GLP release is it's meal based. That satiety is meal based.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that that's important to understand.
Yeah, no, it's important, but it can be another tool for someone that just want to lose, I don't know, 5 pounds to look good at the beach. Instead of injecting GLP-1, maybe eat more protein, and maybe it will help you to lose weight. And that's a better way, because as you said before, a GLP will most likely will lose a lot of your protein, and there are also other side effects. So if you don't really need it, don't use it. It's a
Well,
tool
but
that,
also, I will also say that I believe in body autonomy, and I believe that everybody has a choice. And that if someone has struggled with the last 5 pounds for the last
absolutely.
5 years, I am totally
Yeah.
okay with them using a very low dose of a GLP-1, because, people suffer mentally for years. Let's say they struggling to lose 10 pounds, even if it doesn't fit within, what would someone consider this, massively obese? I do believe that people should have a choice. And I know that that's a bit controversial, but who are we
I
to,
don't think, I don't
yeah.
think that it is. I think that we live in the United States, and one of the things that we have, our healthcare system is so expensive, and one of the reasons that it's so expensive is because we have a choice. You can go to different physician. You can literally almost all the drug are available for us. If you go to Europe, you have always like those are the drug that the country can are willing to support, and the rest you will pay. So I think that it's part of our culture. Everyone should have the choice. We need to provide to them the best information, but then it's your choice. I agree with you. The GLP-1 is great, but it has some a side effect, and you need to know that. Um, one more question about some supplement for muscle building. So, we discussed a bit about all the protein powder, but people are also taking creatinine and I don't know, some not supplement, but drinking a lot of coffee or energy drink and so on. What is your opinion about that? What would you recommend our listener to do and so on?
Yes. Number one, dietary creatine. And here's why. It's very difficult to eat enough of that. And there seems to be increasingly more evidence that it's really good for brain. And I would point you to Darren Kandau, I will make an introduction. He is one of the world-leading experts in creatine. I think it's amazing. I also think omega-3 fish oil is very important. Omega-3 fatty acids. We are in a world where we are unbalanced with omega-6 and omega-3. Individuals can take an omega index or a blood test to see where they are. Also vitamin D, which seems to be a bit controversial. Some people say to take it, some people don't. From clinical practice, whether it's placebo or not, my patients seem to feel better when they are in a higher range of vitamin D. Those are my top supplements that I recommend to everybody. And then there are other things that I absolutely love. I love lion's mane. There's an herb called jualalong. There are things that I personally love that someone could take it or leave it. But ketones, I love ketones. But, urolithin A, I love urolithin A. But your top is creatine, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, and let's say if you feel like you need a B complex, great. But you should be testing those levels to determine rather than just wasting money.
Yeah, no, it's a good tip. And we always summarize the discussion with what is your top tip for health span and longevity. So if you can, suggest to our listener one thing or two things that you recommend them to do.
For longevity?
Yeah.
Resistance training, muscle health is everything. If you want to show up strong and you want to show up present, you do not want to be worried about not being able to go to the grocery, not being able to pick up your grandchildren. You know it's coming, and it's not about weathering the storm. It really is about becoming the storm and becoming healthy enough to show up. And that requires skeletal muscle health. It is a requirement. And certainly don't wait for motivation. Rely on discipline and need. Number one, muscle is the organ of longevity. Number two would be, no surprise, making sure that you're getting enough dietary protein. It's easy. Everybody does it. Everybody eats. These are two things that are very easy. I recommend 1 gram per pound ideal body weight. You choose your ideal body weight whenever you felt amazing last. I will also say that I do not recommend eating under 100 grams of protein a day. You can choose if it's animal products, if it's plant products. The best of both worlds is a mixture. But really get that in. And that's really important. That's a great place to start. And then if you want to stack sleep and hormone replacement therapy, I think all of that's great. But you only ask for 2.
Yeah. No, that's a great summary. And thank you so much for that. And I think that we are coming up on our time. So thank you so much, Dr. Lyon. We look forward to exploring the research in the field of longevity each month with you and the leading scientists in the world. For more information, please go to www.InsideTracker.com/podcast. Thank you so much. That was a great discussion. I really appreciate it. And I learned a lot. Really, really thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Longevity by Design. Please subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. Longevity by Design is powered by InsideTracker, a personalized health optimization platform that helps people improve their lives by improving their bodies from the inside out using personalized, science-backed recommendations for nutrition, supplements, and lifestyle changes. To learn more, visit InsideTracker.com/podcast.